Hello, everybody. This is Maurice Kempner, attorney, real estate broker, consultant, coach. Welcome to True Legacy Wealth Media. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about inflation. What is it exactly? And it might not be exactly what you think it is. So, let's say, well, before I get there, most people they think inflation has to do with printing too much money. They think if the government prints too much money and spends too much out of control, that this is going to create inflation. Now, that could be a reason for it, but it's not the only thing, and it's not exactly how it works. It's a serious oversimplification, in my opinion, of what's really going on here. So let's take a look. Let's say that you have an economy, and in this economy, you have five people, let's say, and each person has $1, and let's say there's five widgets. Now, these widgets, let's just say that represents housing, food, everything. Let's just say that represents standard of living. So everybody has $1, and there's five people, so that's $5. Everybody has a widget, so there's five widgets. Every widget is worth $1 in this case, right? So now, let's say the government comes by here and they print another dollar, right? So now everybody has $2. And then there's the same number of widgets. What does that do? Well, that's how most people see inflation. What that does is it makes it so all of these widgets are now worth $2. And that's inflation. The money is worth half as much. It buys half a widget. $1 buys half a widget instead of a whole widget, right? But let's say the government is pretty astute here and they handle inflation more correctly, which is they try to increase goods and services along with the money supply because economies expand and that happens, right? So now let's say they create another dollar, but they also at the same time create another widget for each person, right? So now everybody has $2 and two widgets. So basically, the standard of living represented by a widget has gone up, another widget, and the money supply has gone up another dollar per person, right? But a widget is still worth $1, so there's no inflation. See how that works. So whenever we have what we call a fiat currency, the word fiat just goes back to an ancient Roman word. Means basically because Caesar said so. So the only reason money is worth anything is because the government says it is. They make up this money, they print it. Now, if they print more money, then goods and services increase. You end up with inflation. And if they do it at a really fast rate, you end up with a lot of inflation. And these aren't the only causes for inflation. Another cause of inflation is a lot of paper and lumber and stuff like that comes out of the South, Georgia, and places like that. And let's say there's some kind of a disease in the trees or big fires or whatever. And so these supplies of lumber and paper are just going to decrease dramatically. Well, that's going to cause inflation, and it has nothing to do with the money supply or the government printing too much money, right? So that's another cause of inflation that you have to look at. It has nothing to do with monetary policy or fiscal policy from the government. Now, another thing to look at is how inflation works, and I think a lot of people don't realize this. Is let's say that you had money a year ago. Let's say you had $10 a year ago, and the price of eggs then were $5, and now a year later it's $6. Well, so what's that? A 20% increase? So now the money that you use to buy these eggs is worth 20% less than it was a year ago, right? But let's say that because of the high inflation rate, the government raises interest rates or trying to rein it in, and so mortgage rates go up. And so let's say this causes a downturn in the real estate market. And let's say that real estate prices drop 5%. So then you go to buy a house now. And let's say you have this money in the form of equity in a house and you sell it and you just use equity and you buy this other house. So really you're not paying the higher interest rates. You do that and then you'll just maybe refinance it later and take the money out and you use it for something else, or maybe you'll leave it in there, whatever. The bottom line is that I'm getting at here is if you had this equity or cash, whatever it was you had a year ago, it's now going to buy 5% more of housing than it did a year ago because real estate prices dropped 5% because of high interest rates. So a lot of times when inflation goes up, some things go up in price and other things go down in price. So when they tell you, oh, the inflation rate's 8, 9%, whatever it is, well, that's not exactly true. It depends on what you buy with your money. If you buy eggs, well, it's 20% in the example that I gave you. If you bought a house, it's actually the money is worth 5% more in the example that I gave you. This is just an average. This number they give you is just an average. So some things in a high inflation environment, they'll go down in cost. A few things will, and other things will go up, but sometimes they go up far less than the rate of inflation, and other times they go up far more than the rate of inflation because other things are affected by the rate of inflation. And sometimes something can be affected. So let's say there's some disruption in the oil industry and maybe some kind of war in the Middle East or something, and it affects the oil supply around the world. Energy from fossil fuels is used in everything. That will create inflation that has nothing to do with government policy because everything is so dependent upon energy. So these prices can just go up a lot based on something like that. So when you think about inflation, it's not necessarily as simple as you think in conclusion. And in conclusion, here, some things go up a lot and some things go up less and some things go down as uh, money supplies and goods and services and things like that fluctuate throughout the economy. So just keep that in mind for your own reference. It's not as simple as you might think. But the bottom line here is when you have a fiat currency and the government is issuing this currency, inflation does depend a lot on how astute and how well managed the printing of money or the increase of money supply is matched to the increase of goods and services or the value of the increase of services in the economy. If those are going up at similar rates, then it just increases the standard of living. There's more in the money supply and there's more goods and services in the economy. And that's just normal. That's just how it should be. So the goal here for most governments should be keep inflation very low. You don't want prices to drop dramatically all over the place. That creates deflation, which is a huge problem. We'll talk about that in another video. Keep inflation low and keep goods and services going up at the same pace as you increase the money supply. That should be the goal. Unfortunately, a lot of people in government don't understand this concept, and that's not how it's done. And a lot of politics get involved, and we end up with a lot of inflation from the printing of money for political reasons and for other reasons. I think you all know what I'm talking about there. So anyway, inflation. There you go.